guys, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel, and today I just wanted to give an update on some more of the cards that I have made from my Hope and Faith pad. And this is kind of a twofold video. One, I kind of wanted to give an update as of where I am on the cards now, because then I'm afraid if I make any more cards, then the project shares get a little longer. And then two, this is also for week 3 for the Christmas in July PHA challenge that's going on, or Christmas in July 2020 PHA challenge that is hosted by Christian's Crafty Adventure here on YouTube. And so I wanted to go ahead and get this out for that as well. And then just to kind of give you an update on a few things. So I've been working hard on my Hope and Faith pad, and I have a whole lot of cards. I haven't counted yet, but there are a whole lot of cards. And there's some things that I kind of want to point out as I go through them, but these aren't in order. They're kind of out of order by now. And I've made multiple of most of the cards. And that is something I kind of want to talk about as we get to them. So this one is Operation Right Home sketch number 171. And I did 2 of these, and this was when I got down to the point where I was working with scraps and was flipping through my sketches and saw this one and knew I had some strips that might work. And sure enough, they were exactly the right width. They were 1.5 inches wide, and then I just had to cut them down. So that's really what I did. So this one actually has 3 different patterns from the pad, and then this one has, actually this is 2 patterns. I think this one was that one was more of a cardstock, but this one was just the solid part of a 12 by 12 full-size pattern. So I just did 2 of those, and then here I accented with the gold cardstock in the matting here just because I felt like it needed something, and this one I just used some white vinyl circles. Here is a sketch that I made a whole bunch. And my purpose for that is when I'm working through a full 12 by 12 pad, there are usually 2 of every page. So I'm working with 2 pages of the same design. And I just feel when you're working through that much paper, there needs to be some efficiencies, or it's going to take me forever if I treat every single page like totally independent. So this is one that I was able to make a bunch of, and actually this was one where I was just using scraps too at that point, but this is Operation Right Home number 30. And I was going through at one point and noticed I had a bunch of like almost square pieces. So they're pretty close to 3 by 3 1/4. Some of them, I think there's a couple of them that may be like just shy of that, and one that may be a little bit bigger, but that's what the sketch called for. So I was like, perfect. So the only thing I had to do was come up with a strip here and then a strip here, which I just made my sentiment in some cases. So these cards don't look alike necessarily, but I did use the same sketch for the same size of scraps that I was working with. So we'll actually go, I started here because I had a piece of this Nativity Scene that I really wanted to use, and I had 2 12-inch strips of them. So I just backed them on some blue cardstock, matted it with a kind of a tan, but this was one of the squares that I already had cut, and then this was a scrap piece that I already had cut, and I just brought it to kind of bring out the gold that's in both of the patterns here, and then just added a sentiment that's on that same kind of creamy mocha-ish colored cardstock that I used to mat. So this is the same thing, but I just used different pattern. It's the scrap that I had again, same thing, just a different square scrap pattern. And then I have 3 where I was working with the same square scraps, but had to come up with the strip that goes behind. So by this point, I didn't have any wider strips that were the full length, and because I wasn't covering it fully, I couldn't like cut it and make it stretch. So I just took 3 really thin strips on this one just to kind of piece it together to make it look wider, and then added my sentiment over here. and then punched some circles out of the scraps of where I cut the sentiments out of. Just punched 2 different sizes of circles and added them down here in the corner. I did that on all of them, except for this one I did have a thicker strip. And this one I pieced a thin one with a slightly wider one. So that's kind of wanted to talk through my rationale on some of these. When I get down to scraps, that's why I don't necessarily... The sketches help me figure out a good design and a good way to use those scraps, but I don't necessarily worry if my scrap pieces that I'm using are the exact size as what's on the card sketch. It's just giving me an idea of how I can use these pieces that I have left. So my point is, don't get so caught up in having the exact measurements, because it doesn't always matter. As long as you have all of the pieces and your sizes are close, it should be fine. You can roll with it. Here's another one that I made a ton of. And again, had an idea in mind of what I wanted to use for this part on the sketch. So this is Unknown. It was one of the sketches that came in one of my past Flavor of the Month kits. But these were the 2 1/4 inch square cut aparts that I had, and I made my tags that I shared in my last video. I had some left and had an idea that I could use them for these cards. So the background cardstock is different. It just it's based on whatever scrap I could find to use for the scallop piece here. And the scallop pieces, again, was just going through my scraps, trying to find something that was close in width. And there were some that they may have been a 12-inch strip and the right width, and so I just trimmed them down and then added the scallop border with a border punch. So, and then the strip that goes across here may be different as well. I was just using what I could find. But the common thing in all these is it uses one of those cut aparts, and it has like the gold embroidery floss that I had out because I had tried to use it on my sheet load cards. Well, I did use it, not very well on my sheet load cards at the beginning of the month, and so I thought I would go ahead and use it, and I ended up using that up, so that was nice. So these are all the same layout. Some of them are duplicates based on the cut apart because I had 2 of each. And on these there's different cardstock and then different embossing folders. I was playing around with embossing folders trying to find one that I really liked, and just kind of ended up liking the polka dot the best. So like this one almost made the paper weak. It's like a crosshatch pattern, and it actually tore up here, and I pieced it back together, but it just made the paper really thin, the cardstock really thin. And this one is more of like an argyle background, and then here was polka dots, and this is just a diagonal stripe. And then these are both polka dots. So this is one that I was super excited about using and then totally forgot to round the edges. So this is an I Heart Sketches sketch from September of 2011. I don't think I've ever used this one before, and I was excited to use it, and then got so excited to use it that I forgot to round all the edges on my pieces and the mats. Oh well. So here I just used 3 different patterns, and 2 of them were kind of like a busy pattern with the gold foil detail in it, and then I tried to pick one that was kind of just a calmer pattern. There wasn't as much going on, and there was no like bright gold detailing. There's like a gold color in it in the stars, but it wasn't as like in your face, just to kind of tame the card a little bit so it wasn't quite as busy. But I did back them all on that gold foil cardstock that I got from Recollections. And then here I did heat emboss the Silent Night sentiment. I used some gold. It's a gold glitter embossing powder, so I don't love it because you can feel the glitter. It's not like a smooth gold, but it's the only one I had. So I decided that the the whole blinginess of these cards warranted some embossing powder. So, but I was bummed that I totally forgot to round the corners, but that's okay. Here is another one that I got a whole bunch of, and these are all exactly the same. So this is CPS 217, so that stands for Cards Positioning Systems. And I've used the sketch a lot in the past. I haven't used it in a while, but basically it just used up a good portion of this pattern paper. Like I think I had 2 full sheets of this left. And so I just went through and cut down as many pieces of the size as I could. And I think 2 7/8 by 4.5 is what I cut it. And then it also I used some of that white background with the gold stars on it as a mat for this burgundy paper. So that also used up most of 2 sheets of that white paper. And then I just triple layered, matted it with tan cardstock, and then stamped my sentiment down here. And then these are just punches from cardstock scraps, but there's like 8 of these and they are exactly the same. So if you're looking at, several full sheets of paper, they're the same pattern, don't feel like you have to use them differently. Find a sketch or come up with a design on your own that uses like good size pieces of that paper, and make as many as you can of that. And then you still have the scraps left that you can use to make some different cards. These don't have a sketch. I just had like 2 strips of 4 by 12-inch strips of this pattern paper left, and so I wanted it to be the focal point, so I just went ahead and used them as background, and then added a strip and then a sentiment down here. And then my sentiment circle is double matted, and the navy matte part is just a scrap of another navy pattern from the pad. And then these 2 don't necessarily have sketches either. I was just trying to use up these longer cut-aparts, like strips that were in the pad. And so I found a navy pattern strip that would be wide enough to house. I wanted to have a little bit of it left at the bottom and then a little bit at the top, and then that sentiment strip kind of going all the way across. And then just picked kind of a creamy pattern paper to go against this dark green, or red in that case up here. And then these angels I fussy cut out of one of the big full 12-inch images, and so just decided to add them up here just to kind of help bring in some color at the top. So these are 5 by 7, bigger than what I normally make, but again, just trying to use those up. So here is one where I had this Peace on Earth, Goodwill to All, and it was a 12-inch border cut apart. And so I cut it down and broke it up and managed to fit it onto the width of a card front. And so I was trying to come up with some way to use it and had been playing around with it on different cards, and then had some strips, and it finally dawned on me, well, what if I just kind of add them as strips on the card? And since it wasn't long enough to go all the way across, I decided to alternate like the side that the strips start from, and then just used up some of the strip scraps, but just tried to keep a consistent pattern. This sketch doesn't have a name, but I will link it below in the description box. And again, was trying to figure out how to use some of the scraps. So this was a longer piece, and just cut it down and then added the fishtail. And then these were all little scraps that I think I trimmed it just a little bit off of. And I made these like 1 1/4 inch squares. So I just trimmed a little bit off of it. And because this one had a green pattern, I wanted to back it on a red matte square. And since this one didn't have any green, I backed it on matte, and then just kind of did it alternating with the square matte and the card matte. This one I have a bunch of, and again, they're slightly different from each other based on the papers I had left, but this is my favorite thing, sketch number 328. And I had some fuller sheets of like these cream colored backgrounds with the design on it, and so just decided to go and try and use them all up in the same way. So my card mats vary. Some of them are patterned paper from the pad, and some of them are just plain cardstock, depending on what I had. And the strips going behind also vary based on the paper. So here I have two thinner strips kind of grouped together. Here's a wider one, and actually this strip, there were several of them that were only like that long, and so I just cut them in half and then pieced them together. Since you can't see it, you can't see that there's a big gap right here, but I was just trying to make them work. This one has two thinner ones together as well. And then all of them I just have cardstock circle punches up here in the corner. Got a handful of these. This is Sunday Sketches number 12. And again, this was a great way to use up some of the larger pieces. I think I must have started with this one and then went to, where'd it go? These. But this is a 4 1/4, I think this is 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of this paper. So that helps you burn through it pretty quickly when you make card mats out of it. And then they all have a tan strip of some sort, depending on what kind of strips I had left. And then I think they're all, no, there's two that are blue scallop circles with one of the 2 1/4 inch cut aparts that I had. I punched it into a circle, and then use some of the pattern paper scraps to punch a scallop circle behind it. And then these were from another border strip cut apart. I just added those as the sentiment. And then these other 4 all have like just a green cardstock mat. And then I stamped, these are 2 different stamps. One is the little nativity, and then the other one says all is calm, all is bright. And they're from 2 different stamp sets, but I liked that they were the same width and I could use them together on a like 2-inch circle. And then on these next several, I was just trying to figure out a way to use some of the cut apart. So this is my favorite thing, sketch number 170. And again, these were longer cut apart strips. I just kind of chopped them up and then added them to like the left hand side. Like the sketch actually just had 2, but I went ahead and they would have been longer, and so I just went ahead and chopped it up into 3. That let heaven and nature sing, and let earth receive her king. So this was, I think these 2 were all one long cut apart, and I chopped them into 2 different sentiments and then chopped them up into smaller bits from there. And then here was just using, like this is just some paper from the pad, like one of those full 12-inch patterns. So they all have like an edge of that gold frame on it somewhere in the card. And here again, this was another cut apart piece, just kind of chopped it up and added it onto the front of this card. Had to be creative. There was a lot of longer strips with sayings on it that would be nice to use, but it didn't make sense if you only used like bits and pieces of it. So I had to get creative in trying to figure out how to use those. And then here I have a whole bunch of these as well. This is Sweet Sunday, sketch number 239. And went through and looked for scraps that were, like this one actually gives you the dimensions, probably courtesy of Christy Marcotte. So I just looked for pieces that were close to that size, so they didn't have to do tons of trimming. And so there's like several different variations of pattern combinations. I think I must have started with the full sheet of the trees and then just looked for smaller pieces of that background layer. So, but there's a ton of these. And then these last ones are using cut aparts from the pad as well, and they follow the same format as this card layout. So just have the border strip here, and on this one, this was another cut apart, but it didn't have anything in the middle, so I just stamped "O Holy Night" inside of it. So there are 2 of those. And then this one wanted to use that Christmas. And so since the Christmas had some gold foiling on it, I did back that on gold foil, but didn't necessarily back the rest of the card with it. But I did add a gold foil star punch in the center of my circle there. So I just counted, and I have got 70 cards for this round. And this is what I have left to work with. These are all the scrap pieces that I have left. This was another set of border cut aparts that I had, and I just decided to stamp a sentiment on them, and then I'm going to add them to the insides of some of the cards. There are 6 of those. I haven't added any scraps to the insides of the cards yet, so I will add those. And then I have these angels that I had fussy cut out from a larger image. And then I do have this sentiment cut apart left, and then the rest are just random scraps. And I just wanted to talk about this for a minute, because I know a lot of you say that you just get to a point where you're stuck or you give up, and I'm at that point. And I've talked before about how I push through. And sometimes I say I find something that I can work on, like I'll find something that kind of helps me get the flow going again, and that helps me push through. And then sometimes I just kind of have to switch focus onto a whole nother project for a little bit, and then I can come back with a fresh eye after a day or so and can dig back into it. So I'm at that point where I'm stuck, and I'm kind of tired of looking at it. I went through last night and pulled out a bunch of sketches that I thought might work for scraps, and was looking through them today, and none of them, nothing's really jumping out. There's anything that I do at this point, I'm probably going to be chopping up these scraps even more, and I think I was just hoping for an easier way out, something that I could use some of the bigger scraps together for, and there might still be, but right now my brain's not going there. So if I were to keep pushing through at this point, I would probably take this sketch. If you watched me for a while now, you know this is my favorite sketch. And I know I have a lot of strips that are about 1.5 inches. So I would probably start with this one and start cutting down, but that is a lot of cutting into little pieces. But hopefully once I would start doing that, that would kind of get the juices flowing again. But there's a lot of scraps. And here's some, these are probably the biggest pieces that I have left, are some 12-inch. They're about 1.5 inches, probably between 1.5 inches and 1.75 inches and 12 inches long. And then just some chunkier strips here. So that would be kind of my next step if I were to just try to keep pushing through. But I honestly think I want to take a break, because I do have several different Christmas projects going on this month. This is a good opportunity to switch gears for a little bit, kind of rejuvenate myself in a new project, and then maybe after a day or so I can come back and just kind of look at this with renewed, refreshed eyes and some more enthusiasm. So a lot of you have asked how you make it through a whole pad, and so I just thought, since I was stuck here, that I would take a moment, show you the cards I've made this round, and then kind of talk about what I do, how I'm feeling now, and what I do when I get to this point. So that is where I'm at. I have gotten a lot out of this pad so far, and I really have enjoyed it. I found that I've enjoyed it more than I thought I would. The colors are just very rich and beautiful, and I don't work with gold foil a lot, so that was kind of fun, and I've used some new sketches, and it's just been nice to work on Christmas. But I've hit that wall, that point where I'm going to take a little break from this and work on something else. So that's where I'm at today, and I hope you enjoyed the cards that I've shared. The sketches I used will be linked in the description box below. Let me know if you have any questions on anything, but thank you guys so much for your time. And I will also include a link to the playlist so that if you've missed some of the other projects I've done with this pad so far, you can catch up on that. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, and you can hit the notification bell, and that way you'll know when you'll be able to see the remaining projects, because I do have some other projects that I wanted to share, but am going to share those next week. So anyway, thanks guys. I hope you're all having a crafty day.